Hi everyone, this is Kim C, and you're listening to the Year of Underrated Stephen King podcast. This is a one-woman, lecture-style Stephen King podcast akin to a classroom experience where this university fiction teacher and constant reader hits the nerd button in the most formal way possible to analyze Stephen King stories from the underrated to the mainstream. What can I say, folks? I'm just a girl who loves the fiction craft and loves Stephen King's writing. So welcome to the place where the academic roots and the fan love are panini pressed together. And together we shall be, dear ones, because at the end of the day, I really just want to be with you constant readers, and those of you who maybe want to check out this Stephen King guy for the first time, or pick him back up after years and years apart. A lot of us superfans can tell you that speaking this King language of stories and characters is an instantaneous method for building a friend bridge. One of you throws out a novel title, a villain, an unforgettable moment, or fiery quote, and the other person quickly picks up the slack, and suddenly the distance between you is closed, and the bond is in place. Buddies, today you will hear such an event happen with the incredible guest on today's Constant Reader Seat of Honor. For those of us who have read Stephen King's The Stand, which technically is not me, I haven't exactly finished it, more on that later, but I do know about a guy in that story named Stu Redmond. Stu is the epitome of goodness and the right thing and a warrior for the light side, and in addition to all those white knight characteristics, there is also kindness, generosity, bravery, all the things that make up a tremendous hero. And guys, I think Stu Redmond is real, and I think he is author Jonathan Janz. Mr. Janz would most likely say that's high praise, but I'm dead serious, folks. Just you wait. You're going to hear it, I promise. Mr. Jonathan Janz is not only a fellow educator, but a prolific horror writer of numerous stories, with a few being Witching Hour Theater, The Sorrows, The Nightmare Girl, The Dark Game, The Siren and the Spectre, The Dismembered, Children of the Dark, and most recently, Children of the Dark 2, The Night Flyers. I would also absolutely declare this individual a Stephen King story expert and constant reader of the highest and most distinguished order. This conversation is full of awesome King reflection, a ton of emotion, and a couple tears. So I recommend prepping oneself with a few tissues, because I definitely needed some. Mr. Janz gets it, guys. He really gets the power of this constant reader thing, and I'm so proud to share this conversation with everyone. Prepare to feel all the feels and remember why Stephen King readers are the best, most intelligent, empathetic, and generally the coolest people on planet Earth. It is with an overflowing amount of joy that I present today's constant reader interview guest, horror author Jonathan Janz. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the most special of days. Today I have the honor of introducing Mr. Jonathan Janz, horror writer, to the Year of Underrated Stephen King podcast. Welcome, Mr. Janz.
Thank you so much, my friend. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm buzzing. So thrilled to have you in the Constant Reader throne. I love your thoughts on King, and my radar went off the charts when I realized that you're a King guy.
Yes.
Let us begin with our very first question to kick off the Constant Reader interview, and that is, how old were you when you read your very first Stephen King title, and which title was it?
Yes. So I was 14, and it's weird. My mom was really supportive. She was a teacher, and she always read to me and was amazing in that regard. And my grandma helped raise me kind of in the library. So I was always around books, but for whatever reason, it was a combination of things that we might get into at some point. But I didn't have any academic or intellectual confidence. I just didn't think that I was at all intelligent. And part of the reason why was whenever I would pick up a book, I'm sure I remember like Peanuts cartoons, like collections of those I would read when I was little. But whenever I would pick up a school book, anything that was assigned for class, I was defeated by it. I just couldn't get through the first couple paragraphs. I remember particularly this book called Lord of the Flies, which is now like one of my favorite books, partially because King recommended it, actually. And once it got his stamp of approval, I'm like, oh, it must be good. So I got to go back to it. But when I first tried to read that, it talked about boys crawling out of a scar. I'm like, how is that possible? How can human beings crawl out of a scar? Because I was taking it too literally, right? I didn't realize it was a scar in the earth from a plane crash. And that was just the kind of thing that happened to me. So I had no confidence academically or intellectually. And I remember I went to a Hallmark gift shop and I was buying a card from my mom. And I don't know why, because it was like in June or July. So I don't know why that would have been, but her birthday's in December. But anyway, I was getting her a card and I walked by this rotating rack of books. And ordinarily, I would have passed that by without a second glance because that was a different world. That was meant for somebody smarter than me. But that day, this cover caught my eye, and it was a black cover with this ghostly greenish yellow light. You're probably going to figure out the book I'm talking about before I say it. And I recognized right away that the author, and it was, of course, Stephen King. And I knew King made scary things. Like I'd seen The Shining, I'd seen probably The Dead Zone and Carrie and some things like that. So I associated his name with good things. But then the light on the cover was creepy and all that, and I'd always loved scary things. But the title was weird. It was the Tommyknockers. And I was like, what on earth is a Tommyknocker? That's such a bizarre word. I've never heard it before. And so I picked it up and I looked at the back and I saw it involved, I don't even know what it gave away, but whatever it was really entrancing. So I happened to have money that day and I went and bought it. And I took it home and I started to read in the backyard, thinking only of how cool I would look carrying a book. I wasn't actually thinking, because I always admired people who had books and I always thought people who were readers were very smart and were part of that forbidden world. And so I remember carrying it out to my backyard and thinking, oh, I look cool. I hope my mom sees me because she'll be really proud. It'll be another 5 minutes and then I'll be totally confused and then I'll just set the book aside. But something really magical happened. I started the book and I was slow, but I really became immersed in it. I understood what was happening, the way that he built paragraphs, the way that he worded things, and you know this so well, his voice like spoke to me through those pages. Again, I wasn't fast, but I'd probably read 15 pages before I realized that I was doing it. And I and that's what turned me into a reader. And I had this epiphany, and it was that I wasn't intellectually inferior. It was just that I'd been reading the wrong books. I'd just been reading things that weren't that tailor-made for me. And King's voice was kind of and that I'm telling you, it sounds so cheesy, but he pulled me out of that terrible place of low self-esteem. I get choked up just because he changed my life. As much as you can change somebody else's life and never having met them, that's what he did for me.
Mr. Janz, this is a record. This is an absolute record for bringing me to tears on the first question. Wow. I am floored. There's so much to say about that. Number one, you're a born storyteller, and it's such a joy to see that and just hear people naturally do it with your own memory. It's like, wow, I was completely whisked away by that.
Well, thank you. I just thought I was rambling.
No, I love listening to born storytellers, and you're definitely one of them.
Thank you.
That's one of the bumpiest King titles out there, but the fact that it awakened your readership, that's very groundbreaking, very life-changing.
It was so amazing. It was so transformative, like you said, it was. And yeah, like you said, it's not his, I think it's one of his least favorite titles. I don't think he likes that book very much because I think he himself was going through some challenges at that time, kind of like different challenges than the one he had when he wrote like Dreamcatcher. So I think he dislikes that for a different reason, or at least doesn't love it as much as his others. But I, of course, knew none of that at the time. And for me, it was just the most amazing thing by far I had ever experienced, better than any movie I'd ever watched. And I've always been this huge movie lover, but it was better than any movie. It was that transformative.
That makes me so happy. I'm going to be thinking about that days later, just so you know. So
Okay.
days from now, I'm going to remember. It's so powerful, Mr. Janz. Your king memory is just so strong. I love this.
Thank you.
Into our second question, because Tommyknockers was the first at the age of 14, at present, are you someone who's read them all, every King title? Have you skipped around like I have, just sort of taking a very unorthodox yellow brick road? Or some of the newer stuff you might not have read yet?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a yellow brick road skipper, kind of like you. I
Perfect.
It's easier for me to pinpoint the ones I haven't read. So I haven't read Hearts in Atlantis. I haven't read Billy Summers' Lisey's story, which I hear him talk about a lot. I know he loves that one. So I need to read. I need to read all of them, of course. And let's see what else. I haven't quite finished Fairy Tale yet, though I'm loving it. And that might be, oh, and I haven't finished If You Like It Darker. I haven't finished that collection. I've finished the first two stories and was mesmerized by them. I just haven't read the rest. But I think that's about it. There are only like four or five books that I haven't read by King, and I've read the rest. And like you, just cherish the rest. Yeah. Well, are there some that you haven't read?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Firstly, the ones that you haven't read, you're in for a treat. You're
Oh,
in for a delightful time. I, for whatever reason, Mr. Janz, haven't read most of the 90s. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I've read Rose Madder, and I think that's it. Like, there's a big old hole in the 90s, and I don't know why or how that happened. Gosh, I need to do a whole decade overhaul.
and what a wonderful thing, though. Like you
Yeah.
kind of said to me, like that's such a wonderful thing that you have ahead of you. It's just exciting. It's thrilling that you get to experience all that.
I'm looking forward to it because word on the street says that 90s King is a little wacky. It's different. It's new sobriety years. There's all sorts of stuff going on. He's exploring some strong themes with women's issues and domestic violence, and I'm into it. I'm really excited. So it's gonna be good. I just gotta get there. I'm just being led on way too many different paths. There's Crime King, there's Dark Tower King, so I
Yeah.
am up to eyeballs in this man's work, which is a good
Yeah.
problem to have.
It's such a good problem. Yes, and I mean, that's like what you're saying about him is one of the many reasons we love him. But he never writes the same book twice. He explores so many different areas, goes so many different ways, and I just feel like he stays true to his muse, or however you want to put that. You never feel like he's writing. He's never writing for anything other than the magic of storytelling, and that's just so beautiful and pure that I think that it resonates with every book, and that's one of the reasons why we love him. Yeah.
Very well said. We are going to skip down said road and talk about some villains. This is such a fun question, so I'm always really intrigued to know who and what might be your favorite Stephen King villains.
Just like with his protagonists and other characters, there's such a spectrum, so many different types of antagonists that he has. Two that, when you ask that, two that pop off memory to me. One is Rose the Hat from Doctor Sleep, and the other is Rhea from Wizard and Glass, Dark Tower 4. And I don't know what to make of the fact that they're both women. I don't think there really, I don't know, is much to make of that because a lot of my other favorite villains are not, like Greg Stilson would certainly be in the top five. And just as an aside, I feel like we've kind of been living adjacent to Greg Stilson for the past 8 years, or nine, somewhere around there. But anyway, I think I think that we just those two characters I think are really fascinating to me. And here's the thing, as I say that, I'm leaving out like Pennywise and Randall Flagg, and those two are all over my classroom where I teach it. I teach high school, and those are all over the place. I love Pennywise. I love Randall Flagg, but I just think that those two maybe are a little more, I don't know, readily in my mind because I think that maybe they're not talked about quite as much as those. They haven't been quite as absorbed into popular culture. King readers know Rose the Hat, but like non-King readers might not know who that is. certainly Rhea is much more known to us than the lay person, right? Than the uninitiated. But I think Rose is the kind of antagonist that is just like she's delicious. She's so cool. She's so awful. I mean, she's a murderer. She's a sadist. She tortures children for goodness sakes. But there's something so kind of cool about her, and I think that only is much enhanced by the film because I love the film and I love the portrayal of her. So that's I think that's part of the mystique that I have. I think Rose the Hat on the page is amazing, on the screen amazing, slightly maybe different, but I they've come to kind of blend together in my imagination. Like when I'm listening to the book, I'm imagining the screen version. When I'm watching the screen version, I'm thinking of all the other areas that we get in the book. So I love that one. The other one is Rhea, and she's the kind that I just despise. I just hate her so much. There's nothing like cool or alluring about her. She's just kind of evil. Things that she does, her machinations, the way that she manipulates events, her terrible just cruelty, her wanton cruelty is so and I think the part of Wizard and Glass, we know kind of where it's going. It's a little bit like Doomickey in that King kind of talks about a character that's going to die. We know the character's going to die, but we don't know how it's going to happen. And that really creates this unique dread that I think only King does so well. But we know that a character's going to die. We kind of start to sense that Rhea's going to have something to do with it. But when we see it all go down, we're like, oh my gosh, that was so much worse than I thought it would be. That's so horrid and vicious. Yeah, so I think that just in those two characters, we see King's amazing range of drawing villainy. I don't know. What about you? Which ones pop out for you?
Oh, well, I must pause to commend those incredible choices. Oh, so great. I love Stephen King females, especially villains, so I'm really, really passionate about them. I think that he's doing some awesome stuff that isn't really explored very much, but oh, Rose the Hat is like the sexy vampire, right? She's old as hell. We love that. We love immortals. We love good looking ones too. And even though she's a child killer, we give her a lot of slack for being sexy, you know? And the film, you're right, doesn't help Rebecca Ferguson. She's foxy, so that helps. It does. But I also love how Rhea's kind of on the opposite spectrum where she's so powerful, all the power she has, and she sacrifices her bodily health to get more power. And it is really evil. Evil witchy monster witch. Hansel and Gretel witch. Evil. So I love those. I don't hear them a lot, so I'm really celebrating that you chose two female villains. Very cool.
I teach two creative writing classes, one for eighth grade, one for high schoolers. And one thing I always tell them, there's no truism for all stories, but I think in general, a good guiding principle is the amount of suspense created is directly in proportion to the power of the villain. I think the more imposing, in whatever way that is, a villain is, I think the more suspense can be created. This is a weird example because the movie's not perfect, but I think of the movie Avatar, the original, and I think that that movie really hits its stride. It becomes something really intense when the evil military leader, Stephen Lang, I think is the actor, but when he really takes over, when he really shows who he is, how evil he can be, I feel like that's when things go up several notches, and that's when he and the protagonist Sully are definitely on different sides. And I feel like the same thing is present in the two stories that we just talked about. I think that when Rhea really lets loose and when Rose the Hat declares war on Abra and Danny, I think that's when like Doctor Sleep and Wizard and Glass just really take flight. They become something just really special, really dangerous, but really special.
Oh, well said. Really cool. Really good comparisons as well. I love educators. Yay, Mr. Janz. I love it because your mind's always framing how can you explain it to students? And it's so nice. I get that. I know exactly how that works. I lately over the years have discovered a Randall Flag affinity. I'm into Flag. I really am. I love the changing face of Flag. I can't figure him out, and I think that's why I like him. I like that he's consistently attaching and growing with whatever time he's in
Yes.
through osmosis. So whether he's the walking dude or he's Richard Faraday or he's just Flag in Eyes of the Dragon, I'm like, you're just cool. And I hate that I like you, but I really like you. There's some sexiness to that as well because he is, I mean, the devil's not a bad looking guy. We know this, right?
Right.
It's seductive. It's a seductive thing. So we know what he is, but I'm still into it.
Yeah, I love that because I think there's almost like a montage on the page. There are several montages on the page in The Stand where King talks about all these places where he's been present, right? And it's wildly different places for wildly different causes, but they're all sowing chaos and death and violence and discord. And I think that is Randall Flagg, his very chameleonic. I don't know if anybody on the show has talked about it with you or not, or if you've read about the Stand anthology that's coming next year.
I have heard rumblings.
Yeah.
I had the great joy of speaking with Mr. Paul Tremblay, and he had mentioned that he's in this anthology about writers creating their own fictional pieces in the world of The Stand.
Yes.
I think if I got that correct.
Yes, that's exactly right. So I was very honored to contribute a story to that. And the cool thing that you're alluding to with Flagg, he is, I think, also a great villain is there when they aren't there.
Ooh, nice.
Their shadow is always there. And it's like, even in the scenes, you do get direct examples of that where, like, the judge, I think there's a wonderful scene, I think, with a crow or a raven or something where the judge suspects that Flagg is watching, and we're like, oh no, this isn't good. But even when there's no bird present, we feel Flagg. We feel his presence just breathing just off the wings, off camera. And one thing that was cool about writing in that world was that I felt his presence. I read The Stand when I was 16, and it, if Tommy Knockers made me a reader, I think The Stand and it made me want to be a writer. And I think Flagg, as I listened to it, so I've read it several times. I was listening to it again. It's a great audiobook. I forget the audiobook narrator's name. I should remember it. He's wonderful. Grover something, I think. But as Grover read that audiobook, it was just like I felt Flagg in every scene, even when it's like Stu and Franny, even when it was, especially maybe when it was like Harold. I felt presence, right? I felt him poisoning Harold's mind, taking these flaws and really amplifying them. And of course, Nadine, you always feel Flagg's presence. You want her to turn toward the good, but you know she's not going to. You know what her destiny is probably going to be. So as I wrote a story in that world, what was cool is I don't allude to Flagg. There's no overt mention of him, but it was on the edit. I went back and I'm like, oh yeah, he's kind of there, which shows you just how powerful King's creation can be.
Oh, so awesome. I'm so excited to read your installment in that. I think we're all freaking out for it, truly. We are all jonesing so much for that collection because it's a powerful place to be for fiction. And I'm just so excited for what everyone's come up with. And it's going to be amazing. I'm thrilled. I want you to tell me all the secrets, but I won't make you do that. So
I will. Off camera, I'll tell you everything.
Oh my God, lucky me. VIP experience.
Exactly.
But yeah, so Flaggy, he's doing it for me lately. I am a Randall Flagg girl for all the reasons you mentioned. So good.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
That is a deep well of richness for Flagg.
Sure is.
All right, so we are going to jump back to more layered book-related questions. So this question is asking about a King title that you really, really enjoy, but you've noticed the constant reader community or a lot of Stephen King fans don't really care for it the way you do, and vice versa. Do you feel there is a book that is just so beloved, but you're like, really? That one?
It sounds like I'm copping out. There really isn't. I feel like King is a little bit like pizza. even at its very worst, and honestly, offhand, I can't think of it as very worst. I still love it. I love pizza and I love King in all forms. And I really can't think of any one where I look at people and I think, nah, y'all are wrong. That's not that good. Some of the ones that he's talked about, like Dreamcatcher, Tommyknockers, I love. So for me, it's just varying degrees of love. It's either like kind of warm, simmering love or just overflowing, passionate love. That's kind of the area I inhabit for King. So you asked about like one that maybe people don't talk about enough, right? One that I've been listening to recently is Wind Through the Keyhole. And I remember reading that, and here's the thing, it's like the Dark Tower, the shadow that it casts is so gigantic, right? It contains like all things serve the beam, and it contains in a way all worlds and supports all worlds. And I think that King, with this massive achievement, has kind of imbued it with that weight, that gravitas. And I think that people correctly love Wizard and Glass. I think of all the Dark Tower books that I hear people talk about, that's the one I hear the most, probably. I think I looked at a ranking of the Dark Tower books not too long ago, and Wizard and Glass was the first a lot. Drawing of the Three was often listed as number one. Love that book, have listened to it and read it multiple times. Probably my second favorite, I don't know, maybe my favorite, it might be Wastelands. I love volume three so much because I love like Blame the Mono, I love the TikTok man. I love everything about that book. So that might be my personal favorite. But Wind Through the Keyhole is one you don't hear talk about much. And there's something just really kind of beautiful and sort of old-fashioned about that book. And the story about Tim, all the stories in Wind Through the Keyhole, they connect to each other. But I think that story with Tim, it's like the best kind of fairy tale. It reminds me, because I love all kinds of stories. I love anything that's done well. Like one of my favorite movies, this will make some people tell me to turn in my horror card, but one of my favorite movies is Tangled. I love the movie Tangled. We saw it when my wife was pregnant with our third child. And I remember we went to the theater. We were going to have the baby. It was a scheduled C-section. We saw Tangled like on the 20th, and we had our baby on the 29th. But I remember the snow was falling as we walked into it, and I just felt it was so enchanting. It was just so beautiful. And then in that movie, there's this scene where these lanterns are floating over the water, and Finn and Rapunzel are singing to each other. And I sound cheesy, but that was just moving to me. It's just so beautiful. And it made me feel childlike. And that's what the best kind of fairy tales can do for us is to, send us back to that wonderful, childlike, innocent place. And I feel like Wind Through the Keyhole does that. I think that we really are with Tim. We mourn. This isn't really much of a spoiler because it happens early on. Well, I don't want to spoil anything because I want people to read it. We mourn the passing of somebody he loves when it happens. We are enraged when somebody he loves is mistreated. We're so angry. And you talk about a villain. Oh my gosh, the villain in that. Oh, I wanted to murder that person. And so I think that Wind Through the Keyhole, it works on every level. It works as a Dark Tower book. It works as one of the finest examples of embedded narrative I've ever read, but it also works in the way of the greatest fairy tales. And I think that's a really special accomplishment that King is so good. It kind of reminds me of we see greatness. People take it for granted, right?
Yes.
Like you see just a sporting example is Stephen Curry. You'll see him like videos of him draining threes, making 25, 30 in a row. And people see that and they feel like they can do it. They feel like, oh, it's easy, blah, blah, blah. Just because somebody makes something look easy doesn't mean that it's not extraordinary. And that's, I think, what King does in Wind Through the Keyhole. He does what no other writer could do, I believe, in that book.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this has opened up a huge thing and I'm super excited about it. Okay, so quick preface.
Yeah.
I have not finished The Dark Tower. I'm on my very first journey through it, and I'm just about to start. I know. It's been great. It's been a long road because Wizard and Glass was so incredible. I needed to recover, and it took a while. So
Yeah.
I'm just about to start Wolves of the Calla. It's on my nightstand right now. It's going to happen in the next few days, and I'm thrilled. But I don't know book 5, 6, 7. But I did do something very unconventional on my yellow brick road, and I read Wind Through the Keyhole because it's technically 4.5.
Yes, great call.
And oh my God, I know what you're saying, Mr. Janz. That is the most beautiful narrative, the embedded narrative. I loved the hell out of that book. We start with the quartet and the Stark blast, and they're waiting out this storm. And then it's young Roland in cowboy times, which I adore. And then we're in this beautiful layered fairy tale with all the things you mentioned, with that ending with a very special person who shows up, and I was blown away. And I'm so glad you brought it up because it is worth celebrating. It really is underrated.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear it was so like important to you as well, and that it hit so hard. I think the thing that you mentioned there, one thing to which you alluded that I really appreciate was the Stark Blast. And I think that storytellers in general, I think it's really great for us to remember that this was originally an oral tradition. And I think that the idea of huddling around a campfire or like gathering around the hearth is really kind of the center of all storytelling. It's where it all originated. And I feel like with the Stark Blast, there's this notion of just getting so cozy, right? With this least hospitable of all occurrences happening outside, and then taking refuge. And then the stories themselves being our refuge, right? The stories themselves give us the heat emanates from not only our shared communion together, but the stories themselves warm us. And I think they do that metaphorically by giving us hope in binding us together. And then they do that, I think, almost literally. Like I feel the warm chills. I felt it when you were talking about the Stark Blast. So cozy and happy that that exists. The king was able to conjure up that magic. Yeah.
Oh, so well said. My brain's being melted, Mr. Janz. This is a challenging constant reader interview because every answer I'm just wiping drool off the page. But yes, we talked about Wind Through the Keyhole, which, wow, what a stellar powerhouse of a book. I'm so glad you know this. And from here, this is my big raw reaction question. And I am sorry that we can't go super deep into spoilers because I haven't finished the series. But this question is asking, what are your thoughts about the Dark Tower?
That is
It's big.
that is a big question, as big as the tower itself.
Yeah.
I'm a tower junkie. I love it so much. I so hope, as an aside, I so hope Mike Flanagan and King are able to bring to life the Dark Tower, whether it's on Amazon or wherever else, because I don't know that there's a better person to do it. I think Flanagan is so, he just gets it. He gets us. He's a constant reader. He's one of us. And I think that only a constant reader, that sounds horrible and elitist, but I just feel like a constant reader should be the one to bring the Dark Tower to the screen. And because he loves King's work, he feels King's work, he understands it. So I hope that happens. I just feel like the tower, the Dark Tower, is so, it's just such a broad canvas. And King, I think, does such a wonderful job. Like Roland himself is, you talk about a really fascinating character because there are worlds within Roland. And it's funny because Roland himself is kind of reductive about himself. He talks about himself like he's a plodder, like he's a literalist, like he has no real feelings. He'll just do what has to be done. But there's a lot more to Roland than that. There's a lot more to that. And I think Jake, Eddie, Susanna, I think they all prove that. They all bring out different facets of Roland. He can be a son of a bitch sometimes. He can be terrible when he's like trying to teach Susanna how to aim with her mind, right? Aim with her heart. I think that he can also be just a really pragmatic, cold decision maker, as we've seen in the Dark Tower, but he can also be so generous. I think we get that from Roland. There's a great scene in the Wastelands where he encounters this older group of people, and the way that he treats them, the respect that he shows them, the warmth in which he it reminds me a little bit. There's a great moment. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but there's a great moment near the very end of Lord of the Rings, which is another one of my favorite series and series of movies. There's a great moment where somebody says to another character, "No, we bow to you." My favorite character in those stories bows to these rather diminutive characters, and those, you probably know what I'm talking about, and others who have seen it. I don't want to spoil anything, but I feel like there's a moment like that in the Dark Tower in that book where Roland himself bows, which is not a huge spoiler, but I think that reveals something about him. He can be rather cocksure. He can be sure of himself sometimes, and he should be because he's like the greatest gunslinger on earth, maybe that ever was. But at the same time, he has this generosity of spirit of which he's not even aware, this capacity for love of which he's not aware. And I think that when we love people, we see the flaws in the ways that they perceive themselves, and it makes us ache. I have that with my children a lot of the time. Like my son's, he's getting ready to go off to college, and I think he doubts himself sometimes. And it's just, I feel like, boy, if you could only see yourself as I see you, you wouldn't worry for a moment because you just know how special you are. And it sounds like, again, kind of cheesy, but like with Roland, I think we have that affection. We look at him and we're like, yeah, you might have killed everybody in this town back in the first book, but at the same time, you have a heart as vast as the desert. And I think, again, only King could do that. Only King could draw such a character with such nuance and depth.
Mr. Janz, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make through this interview without sobbing. Oh my God, that was. Oh, how am I gonna do this? Okay, that was incredible. That was the best answer ever, and I'm just swallowing my tears listening to you. Wow, you're so right. You're so right, and I know it's just gonna get even harder as my journey through the tower continues. But I was very skeptical coming to the tower because I fell in love with King I was very late to the party. I was 26, so this was a challenging deviation for me. What the hell? We're in Tull. He killed the whole town. This kid died. Wow, what an ass.
Right.
Okay, cool. The Man in Black. Why do I care? Right? It was a little bit of a challenging meetup, but then I did fall in love with him, and I think that's why Wizard and Glass really broke me, because by that point, I did love this guy, and I loved his friends, and I loved them all together.
Yes.
I'm just, oh, you're so right about when you love people and when they aren't very kind to themselves. And we feel that with them, that peripheral inadequacy. Yes. Oh my God. Anyway, that's gonna stay with me for a while. That was very profound, Mr. Janz. All right.
Well, peripheral inadequacy is a wonderful phrase. I'm going to steal that. That's amazing.
Oh, steal away. I'm crying over here. We are progressing, albeit slowly, because my heart has liquefied. Thank you, Mr. Janz. So this is a relatively new question that has birthed from my love of possibility. This is the fiction teacher in me, as I'm sure you'll respond to it as well. So this is a question about Stephen King characters who you would like to give a prequel or sequel to. So you could pick anybody you want, very similar to Danny from The Shining. We get Dr. Sleep. Holly has a big old installment behind her now. But the second part of this question, because I'm greedy, is as a writer and a fiction instructor, if you had the green light from King to write the sequel to Firestarter, where would you take Charlie McGee?
Wow, I got to be honest with you. I haven't read Firestarter since I was probably 17 or 18. So I would have to go back and really pick up those breadcrumbs. I remember, was it Rainbird who was the villain of that book? Oh, you talk about a villain. Woo, that's a good villain. Good gravy. Yeah, I think Charlie would be fascinating. And I like you, my wheels are turning because who would have thought? I think Doctor Sleep was the sequel that we didn't know that we needed. At least I didn't know, right? I didn't know that certain stories you can definitely see that it almost requires one, but The Shining felt pretty complete. The book itself felt pretty complete, but then once you get into Doctor Sleep and you see where Danny is, oh my gosh. Then you realize, oh, I need this story and I need to hear what becomes of this poor kid. So I think, yeah, Charlie, the trauma of what she had to endure would be fascinating. She would bear the scars of all that occurred. And yeah, and then her powers, that's boy, there's so much potential there because one would think as an adult, right? What could she then do? Or then what would she try to avoid doing? I don't know. Do you have like an idea of where you would take that? Because that's a pretty cool one.
Right, it's so fun. And one of these days, if I ever had a large amount of funding in my life, like a lottery win, I want to do like a writer's camp, and I want that to be what we do.
Really?
Yeah, I want to have a contest. I want to do a whole thing about where would we take Charlie, because she's one of the most mysterious King characters because she's 9 when the novel ends. 9. She's
Wow.
so little
Wow.
and alone. I mean, I'm sorry for the spoilers, but no more parents. She's got no parents, no grandparents. Girlfriend is alone, this little baby. And
Wow.
so, being the 80s, I always thought Russia would get her. I was an 80s baby. I didn't get to enjoy them as an adolescent, but I was born then. And so, through osmosis. But anyway, I, like any 80s loving fan, Russia has to be there. I know it's cliche, but I want her to have some sort of mentor over on that side
Yeah.
who might hold her back from all that she is. So I want adolescence in Russia, and then I want her to come back home. And that's all I have thus far. I don't know how long, but I know that Russia's a hard place and it's a cold place, and she's a fiery girl. So
Yes.
the fire and ice, and I love
Yes.
that so much. It would be a very cold Balkan childhood there, Balkan adolescence, and then bring her home, but that's where I'm not quite sure. It would depend on the ties of Russia, like what would happen there. Who does she love? Who did she lose? And then when she comes home, what are her motivations? So I'm still mulling it over.
Amazing though. You're already, wow, that sounds incredible. I love the premise.
It's a fun question for writers. I love this question, so I'm very greedy. Thank you for indulging me.
Anytime, always, yes.
All right. So we are jumping around to Stephen King film. Let's talk about your favorite adaptations for film and television.
Hmm. One that I really appreciated. This is not, well, I'll give you one that's a little, I don't know if it's mentioned a lot, but okay, so Shawshank Redemption. I would be so remiss if I didn't mention that. That is one of my top 5 movies of all time. I think that that is one of the rare cases where the book and movie are equal. And by equal, I mean like they're both an 11 out of 10. They're both perfect. I love them so much. I think that an older one that I remember just loving and I haven't seen for years is The Dead Zone. I remember just thinking that that was really beautifully done. I think a more recent one that honestly, I think the bigger a movie is, the more critics it's going to draw, right? I feel like it's almost, I don't know, it's not mentioned very much. Like you hear people mention the best horror movies of this century, and the titles I see are very deserving. Like you'll see Get Out, which should be mentioned. They mentioned It Follows, which should be mentioned, and all these titles that are amazing. One title I don't see that much is It Chapter One. And I think that that was maybe because it was so successful. Like I remember I was looking at the Box Office Mojo list of best-selling movies of all time, and then they had a list of best-selling R-rated movies. And if not the number one, it was in the top like 3 or 4 box office in history, like $668 million, something just outrageously high. And I think that it was so good and it's become so canonical in horror and in popular fiction that I don't know that people really appreciate how good it is. I go back because my daughter, Juliet, we love to watch and rewatch horror movies. And they're like comforting to her, which is really interesting. And that's one that she'll put on as like a comfort movie. It's like that and like Trolls. And like all these really most of them are animated. Like
I love trolls.
yeah, Trolls, Lorax. Like she loves animated movies, which is great because I do too. But then it'll be it that she'll have on a lot of the time because it's comforting to her. And so it's on our TV a lot. And every time I walk in, I'm taken by how just efficiently and faithfully rendered everything is. I mean, obviously it's going to diverge because it's a different medium, but you could really, is it Muschietti? Is that how it's pronounced? The director, Andy? I think you can really see how much reverence. That's the thing. It's like I don't expect a director to literally transfer everything to the page. Being a film teacher and somebody who writes screenplays, I know as well as I think better than most that you need to change things, right? It really frustrated me, like listening to people talk about the Lord of the Rings movies because they talk about how horrible the changes were. And to me, whatever they would talk about, I'm like, that made the movies better, right? That would have slowed things down or that would have been silly. And I feel like with Mike Flanagan, for example, he changed a lot of Doctor Sleep, right? That's not the same book. That's a very different rendering because he brought in Kubrick's movie, but somehow managed to enhance all three, the Shining book, the Shining movie, and Doctor Sleep book. He somehow managed to like combine them all and make it really, really special. I feel like in it, I feel like the decisions that were made always were made with reverence for the novel because he tried so hard to include King's spirit and really a lot of specificity, like Eddie and the leper and so many like images in the book. In the second movie, for example, which I love the first movie more, but I love the second movie more than most do, I think. Because like the scene with Paul Bunyan, right? It's like so many directors would have just jettisoned that, just scrapped that because they wouldn't want to, but he went for it. It's like, oh, cool, we're gonna have that scene, right? But the first book, or the first movie rather, so many things he does there that I think either directly translate King effectively or pay homage to King in a really, I think, indirect way. I just think it's much better than what people realize or appreciate.
Oh, I love that. Really good choice. That one is not, you are so correct. It needs to be celebrated to a greater degree, for sure.
Good. Awesome.
I only ask because I have been following the Holly Gibney trail for the last couple of months,
Yeah.
having a really good time. Did you see HBO's The Outsider adaptation?
Oh my gosh, I'm dying to see it.
Okay.
I'm dying to see it because I love the book. I don't know what I was expecting, but the book was even better than I expected. Love that book. Love Holly as a character. I really enjoyed the book Holly, and I'm more than happy to go, follow her wherever she goes. I know that not everybody feels that way. She's kind of a divisive character, but I
Yes.
love Holly. And I love Jason Bateman. And so I think that I would probably love and be hurt by the miniseries. I think yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm so excited for you. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. So one little weird side connection, a producer with whom I'm good friends wants to turn one of my novels into a series. And the way that he wrote like this 35-page extraordinary treatment of my book, like just took everything good about it, made it sound maybe even better than it is. It's just like, I just read it in awe. I'm like, wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever read. But the way, like his little elevator pitch was Mayor of Easttown meets The Outsider. Like he used both of those
Ooh.
HBO or Max, whatever series to talk about what this book would look like as a series. And so, as if I weren't already interested in the Outsider, when the producer used The Outsider as a comp for my book, I'm like, oh damn, I've got to go watch it now because I watched Mayor of Easttown for that reason. Woo, was that good? That was amazing. Kate Winslet is a
Great show.
oh my gosh, it's so good, so good. And what's the name of the actor who's Evan Peters? The guy that was in Dahmer and American Horror Story, is that Evan Peters? He was in Mare of Easttown, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, he's heartbreakingly good. He's so good in that. And of course, Kate Winslet's just an extraordinary performer. So anyway, yeah, The Outsider is like at the top of my pile. I've got to watch it for numerous reasons. And of course, the fact that I'm a constant reader. Yeah.
It now has place next to Shawshank, next to The Green Mile. That's how good it is.
Wow.
It has place on the shelf.
That's amazing.
It's so impressive. The performances are electric. It's a challenging book to adapt. It's a challenging story. And then they give you the crime, they give you the edge, they give you the grit. It is wonderful. And it's got shelf space now next to the greats.
That's so amazing to hear. Okay, so do you think a non-horror lover would, because it's not strictly just a horror novel, right? Like you said, it's kind of varied. So hybrid genre thing. Because I'm asking this because my wife, she's basically sworn off horror. And for reasons of respect, because it affects her too much. Do you think that it would be too horrific for a non-horror person? Because she loves true crime. She loves that kind of stuff, and she loved Mare of Easttown. So what do you think? Should I try it?
Yeah, she'll be okay.
Okay.
For the most part, it's very gritty crime drama, the
Yeah.
majority of the 10 episodes.
Okay.
There is only one scene in regards to the character Jack Hoskins. If you remember, he's like the corrupt, he's not corrupt, but he's like the burnt out chief of police who just
Sure.
ends up being the right hand of the outsider. He's sort
Yeah.
of tapped, if you remember. There's one freaky scene with him. There's
Okay.
only one frightening scene where you're like, ooh, that's creepy, but not bad. She'll be okay.
I love that. I'm going to snip this part of our conversation. I'm going to play it for her because and the thing is also she loves Jason Bateman. I suspect she had and maybe still has a crush on him. One of those names that I hear her mention. He has a podcast, I think, and she listens to his podcast. And so I think that that alone will sell her. And then the connection to the very like vague connection to my work that I just described, I think those will be enough to push us, over the finish line. So I'll get her to watch it.
She'll be okay. I promise.
All right,
It's
good.
really, really worth it. And the crime that's the heart of it. It is a crime story, layered with a little bit of the unexplainable, the supernatural, but it's so subtle. They did such a good job. I don't know how they did it. It's great.
That's amazing to hear. That's so amazing to hear. And by the way, we'll probably leave that one aside, but how gutsy is Stephen King as a storyteller? How willing is he to just follow his muse wherever it goes, which includes doing the most awful things, right? That book is a gut punch.
Yes.
That book's one, it's like I know I need to reread, and I've heard the audio version is awesome. Is that the guy who's done multiple audio?
Mr. Patton?
Will Patton. I think he does Outsider. And so for that reason, it's been on my radar to purchase because he's just kills Dr. Sleep. Gosh, is that a great audiobook. So I want to listen to it. But I think I was so shaken by The Outsider that I'm a little hesitant to listen to it because it's so effective. It cut me so deeply.
Yes, you are dead on. Because I read it once and I did my reread for my book club because we're doing Holly Gibney this year.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling the pain of certain character loss in that novel so much more intensely than the first time.
Yeah.
Because the first time we're surprised, we're like, oh my God. But now that we know, it's even deeper and darker because now you're watching the lamb go to the slaughter.
Yeah.
This is awful. This person is innocent and it's so hard. It's hard.
That will be terrible. You're right. That'll be a totally different experience. Yeah. Wow. And it's almost like the way that you described what happens. I think when we lose loved ones in real life, one of the maybe less discussed byproducts is just feeling lost. I remember when I read that book and we get to the point that you and I are kind of both trying to skate over slightly. I remember just feeling kind of lost. I'm like, oh my gosh, where do we go from here?
Right.
Where could the story possibly go now that this has happened? I just felt like part of my soul had died. I felt a little bit similar almost now that I think about it in Mr. Mercedes. King does something not exactly like that, but something also just very seemingly cruel in Mr. Mercedes is so hard. just emotionally. So and again, that's just a testament to how good he is, how beautifully he draws his character.
Well said, indeed. Okay, let's keep this train a rolling.
Yeah.
I love all of your answers so much. I'm just
Thank you.
hanging on them with my cat claws.
Oh, I love yours too. Yeah.
I'm trying to be host over here and like go down my list, but I'm like, no, no, just who cares? Just let him talk. It doesn't matter. But for the sake of continuity, you are on the
Sure.
constant reader throne. We're going to talk about secondary reading experiences. As we mature, which King titles do you feel you've revisited the most? Or are you one of those that's like, I don't got time to reread it. I got stuff to do and more books to read. Which titles get that secondary, tertiary, quaternary read? And what's it like as you grow in your life experience?
Yeah, I think part of why I reread is simply because of the passage of time, right? I think that the further I am from something, the more I want to relive it and experience it anew. Because here's the thing, I guess I'm only saying this as a disclaimer. I don't know that people appreciate this about King as much as they should. I think he's still growing and in some ways getting better. I feel like he is still improving. And for proof of that, I know it's not like released this past year, but look at like 11/22/63. Like he could not have written that in his 20s or 30s. There's no way he would have written with that emotional depth and the complete command of plot that he exhibits in that. I just don't know that I don't think he would have pulled that off. I don't think he would have written Under the Dome and in fact he said that. He said I think that he wrote that first chapter a long time ago and I think he walked away from it. I think he wrote the part where we see like an animal getting the dome comes down and an animal gets chopped in half, but I think that's all he did with it because I think he realized how vast, as intimate and enclosed that setting is. That's a pretty vast canvas on which he writes. And he couldn't have done that as a younger author. I'm very much of the mind that he's still improving. And I love his later stuff. Joyland, so many things he's done in the last 20 years just is so amazing to me. Having said that, as a disclaimer, two titles that I revisit other than The Stand are It and Salem's Lot. I really love audiobooks. I love reading books. I love audiobooks too. It's very different for me to read in both those ways, but they both are reading. And I think Salem's Lot is so much fun just because of the completeness of that town. I just love the way that King really makes us inhabit all these corners of the lot. You know what he does? Okay, so you drive down the street at night, not trying to sound like a pervert or a weirdo here or whatever, but I think that we talk about this in my film class. I teach film lit. We talk about this with Hitchcock and especially the movie Rear Window, because Hitchcock said there's a line in Rear Window that said we've become a race of peeping toms. And I think Hitchcock understood so well that there's a bit of the voyeur in all of us, not necessarily in a sexual way, but just in a curious way. I think we want to, if you see somebody, like I'll be at this book event on Saturday, and if I see two people like 3 tables away talking and then glance over at me, I'm going to be so burning to know what they're talking about, right? I want to know what they're saying. We all love to be privy to secrets. We all want to know what's going on in these secret lives. And so when you drive down the road, you see, let's just say, an old man washing the dishes. You glance over and you see him, and he doesn't see you. And then you go by. There's a part of you that wants to know what his story is. There's a part of you that wants to know, like, oh, is he married? What does he do at night? Does he watch TV or read books? So I think that Salem's Lot is a really satisfying book in the way that it reveals all of these secret lives. Mabel, I think it might be, who is like the town gossip. I love that. She kind of is the embodiment of that curiosity. And then you have like this, golly, you go to this woman who's like abusive to her child, her little tiny child, and that just hurts your heart, but you can't look away. You've got this just horrible bus driver who's just says and does these awful things, but you're with him. You go to the town dump and you see what happens there. You just see all of these. You're with an affair. You're living this affair as they do this pillow talk with each other. You're like, oh gosh, this is really unseemly, but I'm still reading it. I'm still experiencing it. And so I think that's, King has always been so honest. He always is willing to go there. He's just gutsy in that way, and also very like true to life in that way. And then in it, I think what's so special about that is that I think we are the losers club. I identify, you probably asked this later, so maybe I'll just like, very quickly, but I am Ben Hanscom. Like
Mm.
I don't know that I've felt identified on an elemental level like I do with Ben. So I love going back and reliving these moments where Ben writes a haiku about Beverly. I think that King just absolutely channeled the experience of what it's like to be that age. I think that he captured it better than any other writer, maybe in history, when he wrote The Losers Club. I think he absolutely relived those years, and we get to relive those years with him when we read that book. So I love, and then just as an aside there, Steven Weber, the guy who does the audiobook, oh my gosh, that performance. People who don't read audiobooks are missing out because like that is there should be, I'm sure, I guess there are Audis or whatever, like the
Yeah.
but like they should be better known. They should be on par with the Oscars because the job that he does in that audiobook, it is a Shakespearean level performance. He left a piece of his soul, in our ears with that book. It's extraordinary. So those two, that's a roundabout way of saying Salem's Lot and it, I go to again and again to read and reread on the page and in the audiobook.
Awesome. Such good choices. I speak to a lot of constant readers who frequently go back to Derry.
Do they?
Yeah, it's great. My question, I'm not a parent, and so I wanted to ask, as a parent, how does your reading of it change when that part of your identity, when there are littles to take care of and you're not seeing yourself as a kid, but you might be thinking about your own kid. So, what's it like as a parent?
Yeah, it definitely augments everything. And for me specifically, and just as an aside, not that we want to, we're in this wonderful, we're around the hearth with the stark blast going outside. I don't want to drag us into a really awful space, but I just want to say, and it's a great question that you asked. I'm delighted to answer it. The one thing I want to say that I don't think I've ever said before, I get asked sometimes because people know that means the world to me being a dad. But I think that I just want to make sure I say that, like, as a society, we need to be less, I think we need to be more appreciative of the fullness of people's experiences who don't have kids, because that's not something that completes a person. That's not something that makes a person better, elevates a person above someone else. Because like I don't think you even have to follow politics to hear that rhetoric being thrown around like somebody should have a lesser vote because they're not a parent or whatever. That's just a really repugnant, terrible way to view the world, and it's such a horrible thing to say about someone. So anyway, I guess I felt the need to say that because I never have said that anywhere, and I never want to send the message that I feel like that in some way I'm whatever better. You know what I'm saying, that my experience as a parent is better than anybody else's experience. So having said all that, I do think that what happens in it with Beverly's father, I think cuts deeper now, makes me angrier, just having two daughters of my own, because you really start to realize just how, I mean, anybody can recognize how vile that is, but there's just like an extra layer of vileness that you see in how he talks to his daughter and treats his daughter. Another part that really hits me in a different way, a character that didn't stand out to me much before, but that's Patrick Hockstetter.
Oh, yeah.
Patrick Hockstetter, he does something to somebody really young in that book. And I guess I just wasn't whatever. Like I said, I was 16 or 17 or I guess 18 when I read that. I was a senior in high school when I read it. I recognized it as scary and terrible and all that stuff. But when I heard it as an adult, as a parent, it shook me so hard because I just couldn't believe what he had done, but I couldn't believe how well King had kind of like gotten us into Patrick's mind as he does what he does.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something amazing that an artist can do, because King is not his work. King is not his characters, right? I think he is a very warm person, a very loving person. So in no way do I think that is anything in connection to King. But at the same time, his imagination is so, and his devotion to his craft is so real that he's able to go there creatively and faithfully render the thought process and the emotions that Patrick would have felt as he did what he did. And so I guess what that did, it shook me, but it also made me appreciate King even more. To be able to do that and to go there, I just think is an extraordinary feat of darkness.
Having just finished You Like It Darker, which I'm very excited for you to
Yeah.
finish it, because just when you think he can't top himself, he does in the very next story, Mr. Janz.
Yeah.
It blew me away. Like, this collection is on a whole nother level of special. And it's such a
Okay.
cool thing given King's age and how the fiction is stronger than it's ever been. It's really, really beautiful. But one thing I'm grateful for, having just read Holly, is that I've always appreciated his ability to take the reader to the edge of human depravity, of human evil, of
Yeah.
supernatural evil. But with something like Holly, we do have a lot of human evil in that. And he had opportunities to be incredibly gory, but he chose to do a softer focus and to pan out. And that's wisdom. And that is really trusting the art, but also being who you are at the age you are, and
Yeah.
say, I don't need to do that. You know, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Why should I indulge? Almost a perversion of, you want to get your kicks off of brutal gore and violence. Well, been there, done that. We're just not in that headspace for it, or doesn't need to be said. And so I like that we do have what you mentioned with Patrick Hockstetter, that deep, darkly, for lack of a better phrase, it's an intimate space, right? This is his
Yeah.
deep, dark, secret world.
Right.
And the reader goes there, and it is creatively a special thing, because you're like, whoa, this feels freaktastic. I don't like this, but it's an amazing artistic feat.
Yes.
But now it's very different, because now there's more mystery, and now there's panning away,
Yeah.
softer focus, cutting the scene early. And you're like, okay, I see what you're doing now. And I'm into it just as much as I am the other stuff. But now it's like he's got nothing to prove. He doesn't need to do that. And the way that he does not go to that place, the absence of, is actually stronger.
Yeah. I love that you talk about that. And something else about Holly that occurred to me as you're speaking is the villains in Holly. He wouldn't have written those at a younger age. And I think that it just shows how completely open his eyes are. Because if you follow, I know you do probably, like follow him in interviews and social media and stuff, he has a lot of contempt, I think, for contemporaries of his who haven't learned.
Yeah.
Just because somebody is older, sometimes it does bring wisdom if you're open to learning. Some people are just kind of like happy where they are. They think that they're complete and they don't have any time for empathy. They don't have any time to care about other people. And sometimes those people who are like that, they can be really well educated. They can be rich. They can be very successful, like the antagonist in Holly. It's funny, as we were talking about the antagonist earlier, those are two of the best drawn antagonists I think he's ever done, just in the mundanity of their evil, right? And how believable. Like I felt like I live near Purdue. My family, we live near Purdue. We're like 4 blocks from the basketball arena. I feel like they could live, professors at Purdue live in our neighborhood around here. They could live down the street from me. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if I met somebody that acted like that. Because you can just see, like, if you take away, if you keep the intellect and you take away all the empathy, where are you left? Well,
Yeah.
self-preservation, right? You're left with doing it at all costs. And if somebody were to stumble on to a solution, I bet there are a lot of people who would try to use that. They'd go there.
Oh, such good stuff. I want to talk to you forever, but we gotta keep this train on the track. blame the motto. We're going to kick up the
Yes,
gear a little bit.
absolutely.
We are going to talk about Stephen King settings.
Mm.
And Mr. Janz, for your next book, if you had the magical portal to take you to any Stephen King setting to get stuck for a while and write your book, it could be Overlook in summer before it burned down. It can be Joyland. It can be Little Tall Island. It can be anywhere you want in the King universe. Where would you like to spend some time and write a book?
You mentioned the title Joyland. That sense of place is powerful in Joyland. I think that would certainly be one where I would go. I would have to venture, I'd have to like go through some doorways. I'd have to go to Midworld. I'd have to explore that. I think that would be just so fascinating. Even like, the scene with Shardik in the beginning of the Wastelands. I just think I think the Dark Tower, so many aspects of that are just fascinating. The barony, as it's discussed in Wizard and Glass, is such because I love Westerns.
Yeah.
That's such just a vivid, that book's a Western in a lot of ways, right? And so I think that vivid Western setting would be so just delicious. Although in actuality, it would be terrible. You'd be so uncomfortable and you'd have so few amenities. But in a romantic kind of way, that would be just lovely. I would enjoy that. Yeah. Do you have a specific one that you dig?
Oh gosh. Of course, I've never made a final choice, but I agree with you so much on Joyland. That's a top 5 King for me, Mr. Janz.
Nice.
Joyland is so underrated, and I feel it is the perfect book. I mean, every single page is edited to perfection. There is not a hair out of place, and I don't think anybody talks about it. It is just stunningly tight, and what a gorgeous coming of age story on the beach and the park. Anyway, it might have to be Joyland for me just because I want to stay there. I want to be
Yeah.
there. All of it's great. His job at the theme park, and then he walks along the beach to the boarding house. He's in this land of summer. I, oh, yeah, I am one for creature comforts, a pillow princess, if you will. I do not want scary. No, my vacations are luxurious in that I want to be relaxed. I want to have a slower pace. I want to wear my dresses and I need to be comfortable. And that's going to be the most comfortable, fun place.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It's a great choice. Wonderful choice.
And Midworld would be great, but I would need to be in like the Gilead Palace. It's got to be luxe. I cannot slum it. I'm sorry. I live in an environment very similar to Roland's gunslinging territories.
Oh,
I need out of this dust, Roland. I need a castle, please. I'm a high maintenance gal.
that's hilarious. That's
I
awesome.
don't think I would last long in the content. I'd be dead soon, but I'd make do for a while.
Right.
We are in the rapid fire zone. We just have a few more.
Of course.
I want to talk about, you kind of mentioned a few really good ones for your villains, but do you have any additional Stephen King females that are your favorites?
Hmm. Yeah. I'll tell you what, you might have to jog my memory a little bit with names sometimes. Who was the woman, the lead in 11/22/63?
Sadie.
Sadie, I love Sadie. I love Sadie so much. I fell in love with Sadie,
Yeah.
that particular book. I fell in love with her as much as the protagonist did. So I loved her so much. She was wonderful. Yeah, so she would be on that list. I think Holly is so cool and likable. She would be on that list as well. I think, yeah, I hate to go back to old Stephen King too much again because I want to like give equal weight to his newer stuff. I really I enjoyed Franny quite a bit.
Nice.
She's special in The Stand. A tougher character than maybe we give her credit for being. Like I can't imagine going through what she did at the end of the world. I think that's a really special thing to do what she did. And also Stu is one of my, I don't know if we'll talk about him, but he's one of my very favorites. And so the Franny and Stu thing, I think was really something that I don't know, that always has resonated with me. Yeah, and I still love Beverly. I still like have a crush on Beverly. And I thought her journey was interesting, being in not one but two abusive relationships, but then like starting to have or utilize more agency. I found her path, her growth as a character. I think that was pretty powerful. And in a lot of ways, she's kind of the heart of the Losers Club. And in some ways, she's also the spine of the Losers Club. We hear, I know Big Bill Denbrough is the leader, but nothing good happens in that group without Bev. So I think she had like maybe an underrated strength that I find super appealing and I have a lot of respect for. So there's just a couple that pop into my head.
Very nice. Heart and spine. I really like that a lot. Okay, we're jumping over to the question about Stephen King endings. He's got a lot of criticism over the years. Thankfully, it seems relatively quiet on that front over the last decade or so. He used to get a lot of crap for not being able to end books, in quotes.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of us constant readers disagree with that wholeheartedly and think that his endings are actually quite beautiful. In your experience, have you ever had a Stephen King ending that sullied the journey as a whole, where it just landed in a way that threw you off your readerly axis and it was just hard to reconcile? And then the second part to that question, because I'm greedy, do you have a favorite Stephen King ending? You can definitely have more than one.
Yeah, I think that there are Stephen King books that end in ways that are really painful for me, that contain events near the endings that are painful to me. Just a few. 11/22/63. Duma Key is another. There's another I thought of a moment ago, Revival, if I remember correctly. I love Revival, by the way. Dang, that's an amazing story. There are Stephen King's, oh, The Green Mile. That's the other one I was thinking of. That
Oh,
is
that ending.
has such a painful ending. And what they do is that they'll delay the time between my initial reading and my rereading because I know that I'm in for emotional pain. We talked about that with The Outsider. So those books fall into those categories where it might be a little while before I listen to them again just because they were so emotionally painful, but that's a compliment. I loved the endings even as I ache and am wounded by them. So for me, King is somebody who always stays true to the story. Like he has these best practices, these guiding principles that I wholeheartedly agree with. He believes that stories are pre-existing objects and that we as writers are archaeologists and that we're simply exhuming them and trying to do so as faithfully as possible. And as such, that means that whatever he finds, he puts down on the page. Whether that's something that this Twitter guy doesn't like or this person over here with a TikTok account doesn't like, he doesn't care. He brings it as faithfully as he can. And I always respect that. Sure, there are times where I wish stories would have ended differently. I wish they would have ended differently, with Doomadgee, Green Mile, and 11/22/63. But that doesn't mean that my endings would have been better. In fact, had they ended the way that I wanted them to, the stories would have suffered. They wouldn't have the enduring magic and power that they have with King's endings. So while sometimes I am sad at the way he ends books, I always respect the way that he ends, and I always recognize that doing it the way that he does is better than the way that anybody else would do it, including me. I love the way that he ends books, whether they're happy or sad. As far as a favorite Stephen King ending, dang, that's hard. I gotta be honest with you. I read different seasons back when I was a younger person, probably in my teens. Does it end? Maybe we don't want to give away spoilers here. Does it end the way the novella ends? Or sorry, the way that the movie ends?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay, because I think that ending,
For the body, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the way that Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption ends, in the body, like if those novellas, if the movie versions end the way that those novellas ended, both the body and then Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption, I think those endings are just so poetic and beautiful. I just think that those are examples of King, whether it's happy or bittersweet, following something to the end. I just think that that's exquisite. I think that that's something that just makes my heart ache. I love those endings so much. And then, the things that I've read recently are just as powerful. I read Later, is that the name of it? Yeah, I mean, just so it ends the way that it's supposed to end. It ends so perfectly. I love that ending. I loved hearing it again. I love the ending of The Stand.
Mm.
And that's another one with a lot of nuance because it's not just all happy like the Star Wars ending, which I love, where we're getting the medals hung around our neck. It's not just that, right? It's some loss, some joy, some sweetness, some satisfaction, some fear and dread. It's like all those things. It's like the book itself. It ends in this stew of emotions, kind of like the book itself elicits. So I think that's another one. The Stand is where I think he just nailed the ending, and then he nailed it again and nailed it again. And every facet, every ending of those characters, I think was perfect. Yeah.
Oh, well said, Mr. Janz. As I echo again, oh my goodness, it is such a joy. You are giving me pure magic and treasure. I feel like I just have a giant cauldron of gold coins.
That reminds me of Fairy Tale a little bit.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I know exactly what you mean because with Green Mile, that's probably one of my favorite Stephen King endings, as
Yeah,
painful as it is.
yeah,
And with Rita Hayworth, with Green Mile, some of the more very intense and emotional King titles, I just remember having a vivid sort of synesthesia experience with them
yeah.
where I was visualizing this weight and I'm like, God, this is so heavy. This topic's so heavy. This pain I feel for these characters. But then in this visualization, I'm looking and it's a brick of gold. I'm holding gold.
Right.
That's how King makes me feel.
That's wonderful.
It's a heavy weight, but it's solid, multiple bars of gold in my arms.
That is, yeah,
It's treasure.
that might be the best I've ever heard it put. Oh, it is. It is both of those things simultaneously.
Right.
Wow.
And so when anyone asks, do you want to put that gold down? No, I'll continue to carry it.
Yes.
The heaping weight, the too heavy weight of gold, you could throw another bar on there. I'm going to keep walking.
I love that.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel with I'm just going to carry this weight because what we have to carry is treasure.
It is. It genuinely is. Oh, he's such a treasure. My goodness.
We just have a couple more. We can do some rapid fire.
Sure, sure, sure.
Favorite Stephen King animal or pet?
Oh, this is a very common answer, I guess, but I love Oi so
He's
much.
great.
That sweet little Billy Bumbler. Oh my gosh. I think anybody who loves animals can't help but love Oi. Just because King, I don't know, I feel like he doesn't cheat. He doesn't Oi is still an animal, right? There are human aspects of him, but yet he still retains that nature that a Billy Bumbler would have if it existed. And so, yeah, I see in Oi all my favorite cats, all my favorite dogs.
Oh.
We have bunnies now because of my daughters, and I love them so much, but like that's how we take them out to the yard, and invariably they'll like run over to where I'm standing. And it's just, I feel so honored. I feel so validated. We've got this one named Toad, this little bunny, and he was rejected from 4-H because his forehead wasn't the right like size,
Oh.
whatever. And so I have extra affection for him. He's just this ball of gray fur and he's not fast and whatever. But when Toad like comes over to me, I feel like Jake felt when he bonded with Oi. That love and affection and ownership and like dual ownership. It goes both ways. You belong to the animal as well as the animal belonging to you. And like the way that Jake is insistent and went through the keyhole, I think, on saving Oi. Yeah, that's how I would feel about little Toad, about our little right? If the Stark Blast were coming, you're damn right I would go out there and I would fight through the bushes and pick up that little ball of fur and put him in my shirt and keep him safe. So yeah, I think that Oi contains so much truth in the affection that we have for our animals.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
This is a fun one that was birthed out of my extreme hatred for the character of Big Jim Rennie.
Yes! Oh, what an amazing villain. He reminds me of the guy in Avatar a little bit, but go ahead. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
This question comes from Jim.
yeah.
This question is asking if you have ever disliked a king character so much you would actually physically harm them if you could. You would throw a punch, or you don't necessarily have to. It could be harm from afar. There could be a nice huge rock that you heave at their car, or take a baseball bat to their headlights, or something where you're gonna get violent. Maybe some arson, maybe some vandalism.
Well, as a disclaimer, I am the person who puts a spider on like a paper towel and throws it outside. So, as a non-violent person, I will admit that in Wizard and Glass, we talked about Rhea. When I read that book, when I got to the end of the book, if I had a gun, one of sandalwood grips, I would have shot her.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, I loathed her more than I've loathed, real humans. Like there are very few real people that I loathe as much as I loathe Rhea. So I would definitely wish harm upon her in some way. Like in real life, if I saw her, I probably wouldn't shoot her. But if she wrecked her car, or if she fell and hit herself, hit her head on the glass door, I would not walk over to help her up. That would reveal the darkest part of my nature, the worst part of my nature.
I love that. It's not necessarily you didn't do anything yourself. I wasn't there. You could rationalize it. I support that wholeheartedly.
Smugly look on as she gets hurt.
Yep, I would stand right next to you as she's wailing for help and say, I don't hear anything. Let's keep walking. We're all good here, Mr. Janz. Let's kick rocks.
Feel that way about Big Jim. That was an amazing choice. Oh, an amazing choice. And I feel the same about him. What a horrific person he is.
Yes, and I've never he's in that book a long time, and the rage I felt could not be quelled. And so it stayed with me. I've never felt that strongly
Yeah.
with burning hatred for a
Yes.
character.
Another one super fast is Perlmutter, I think is his name from Dreamcatcher. I think there's a character named Perlmutter that's just like so vicious. Anyway, go ahead. These are great. These are great.
Jumping really quick to, yeah, we'll do this one. We've got two more.
Okay.
If you could get, I don't know if you possess one of these treasures.
Hmm.
If you have the opportunity to get one King book signed, which one is it going to be? Which title?
Oh. Wow. Wow. That's amazing. The ones that just pop in my head immediately are the Tommyknockers, because this is the first. Don't know if he'd be willing to sign it, because I know he's kind of disavowed it. The Stand, It, those for sure, because those are so instrumental. Salem's Lot. But then I would want to have signed the anthology that's coming out in June,
Oh, nice.
just because he wrote the introduction for it. I know he's read it because he tweeted about reading the book. And then that full circle moment where King's writing and my writing and then his signature being in the book, just being that, just I don't know, it's just so special. I'm just so I'm like you. I can tell you feel like it's just like there's this really special just affection. I'd call it love, and not to sound creepy or whatever, but I can say that it's a very special kind of love for him that I have. And I just yeah, I think that would be a really amazing thing for that to happen, for him to sign my copy of that book, just to be able to look into his eyes and just tell him, thank you. Just thank you. I think that would be a really wonderful, wonderful thing.
Oh, we're going to manifest it. It's going to happen.
Let's hope someday.
It's going to happen because ugh, it's good. This is when I short circuit when it gets too awesome. I can't find the words. I can always find the words, but when I can't, that's how you know it's too awesome. To know that your story is inspired by his writing and his world, and you get to put your own storytelling your own fiction in this place that he created, that he gave, and then it's all compiled together. That is magical. We're going to put it out there. I think he's going to sign it, and you're going to have your copy.
I think that would be amazing. I love your idea. I'd much rather have that than a restraining order. So let's hope, hope that doesn't happen. And I promise, Mr. King, if you ever hear this, I'm not going to I won't hug you. Don't worry if you don't want me to, but I will definitely, definitely thank you. Yes. Anyway.
I love it. I don't think he has to worry about us. I think he has to worry about others, like
Yeah, probably.
the non-constant readers. I think constant readers, at the end of the day, we're like, you're just a dude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're a person. That's right. You're somebody's grandpa, and we just appreciate you. Yep, that's right.
100%. So this is our last question to cap off this magical time. This is the final question of all constant reader interviews.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. So this is asking, you can, of course, have honorable mentions, but I would like to keep it to 5 with a little bit of wiggle room. You could do a 6, you could do a 7, maybe. This is asking your top 5 Stephen King titles. It can be short story collections, novellas, straight novels. It could be outlier, collaborative texts. What are your 5 Stephen King titles that are your absolute favorites?
My word. Well, here's the great thing, and this is a cop-out to a degree, but I don't think it is because King's work endures, kind of like the dude abides, and it'll be here 1,000 years from now.
Yeah.
And as such, it continually, each time I make a list, it evolves each time. And his work is continuously changing, and I'm appreciating different facets, right? So the list is constantly in flux. Having said that, I would put on the list in no particular order, I'd put for now, today, Full Dark, No Stars. We haven't talked about that one yet because I think each one of those novellas is just glorious. I know that a lot of people love I forget the title of 1922. I know people love that, and I love it too. I love all 4 of them. I love that one. The 2 that are just, to me, just went to areas that were just really scary were Big Driver and A Good Marriage. I think both of those were Big Driver, for instance, that one turned on a single line of dialogue.
Yeah.
And I remember I literally gasped when I read it. I couldn't believe what the person had just said. And it changed everything. And it went off on a different trajectory. And Good Marriage, you talk about building a sense of fear and dread. Oh my gosh. So that one is there. Revival would be in my top 5 King. Because in that book, am I allowed to say the reasons for it? Because I know this is
Absolutely.
I suck at rapid fire, obviously.
Oh my gosh, I only said rapid fire in case you had to go. I was just trying to be kind.
Oh, that's kind.
You do
Yeah,
you.
okay.
This is your seat of honor. I need all of it.
All right, that's kind of you. That's so nice. Okay. So, yeah, which one? Geez, which one did I just say? I said
Revival.
Revival. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's the deal. Go back to Dance Macabre. King's 2 nonfiction books, Dance Macabre and On Writing, have done more for me than any 2 writing books in history. And so, as a craftsman, one thing King talks about in there, he talks about how people love to insinuate, and he has an appreciation for that. In fact, he might even in that book talk about Ramsey Campbell a little bit, about how Ramsey Campbell, who's sometimes called the British Stephen King, creates an aura of menace. And King does that in some of his stories. In some of his stories, he does kind of work with understatement. One example of that is in The Reaper's Image, the short story. We never really get the coup de grace. We never really see the killing stroke. We're kind of left with the absence of that, but the absence of that is kind of told elliptically, and it's left to our imaginations, and it's so horrific that it's just stayed with me forever after. So King can definitely do understatement. He can definitely do insinuation and implication. But what he talks about in Dance Macabre, what he prefers to do as a writer is he talks about how Lovecraft will take you to the door and barely leave the door ajar. He'll crack it and let you see a glimpse of it. Now, Lovecraft as a person was probably just a total bastard. At least he was a racist, and those two things probably are the same. But Lovecraft also was a really important part of the horror landscape and horror history. He's kind of the link between one of the links between Poe and King. I know there are many more than that, but Lovecraft is unquestionably important. And he did that really well. Like in Haunter of the Dark and other stories, Lovecraft insinuated. He gave us just a glimpse of these eldritch worlds and creatures and beings, so much so that he's kind of spawned an entire subgenre of horror, right? Like when you hear about cosmic horror, you can't hear about that too much without Lovecraft because he's just part of that tradition. Okay, what King says he loves to do is kick the door wide open. He'd rather risk the reader laughing and show the reader everything than he would like leaving that door only slightly ajar. So, even though that's not across all King, I think King is one who will go there. King is one who will try, and that's why I think some people don't think his landings end because they envision something else. They feel like it was foolish, it was a false note, whatever it is. But what I love is King kicks the door open. Most of the time, he'll kick the door open. And Revival is the ultimate kicked door. He not only kicks the door, he knocks down, like in Blazing Saddles, when the whole facade of the street falls down and you see what's on the other side. That's what he does in Revival. And what's so, I think, amazing about that is what's on the other side of that door is indescribable. He takes the indescribable and he describes it in just explicit detail. And I read the final parts of Revival as he goes into this other place. I read them, I think, without breathing. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like, okay, so this is my favorite writer describing something that Lovecraft and others only teased about. They only kind of insinuated. Here's King absolutely describing it as no other writer has or probably ever will. And he's just nailing it. Every paragraph is a grand slam. He is absolutely nailing this description. And so, like, just for the latter moments alone, Revival to me is an absolute just masterpiece. So I've got Revival, Full Dark, No Stars. I think that another one I haven't spoken about that would probably be top five is Pet Cemetery.
Nice.
And that's one I haven't revisited because it so wounded me.
Yeah.
And it so cut me and so shook me that I haven't been able to go back. But I think that alone shows you how powerful Pet Cemetery is. And it still echoes. Like I wrote something the other day. I'm working on this novel this summer, and this theme of what it means to do. Okay, so if we had the chance to bring somebody back, would we do it? And then if we did it, would we be doing that for them or for ourselves? And I think that that's a question that King, like, people like sometimes dead is better. Like we know that. We know how things return in Pet Cemetery. But like I think that if you get into the mind of Lewis Creed, if you get into the mind of Judd Crandall and all to do with the notion of resurrection, why why would we resurrect someone? Why would we bring them back? And I think that those lingering questions, I think that it really elicits a lot of self-reflection. And I think that in some ways it holds up this mirror to us that reveals both noble traits and selfish traits. Because you ask yourself, like, knowing what he knows, should Lewis do what he does? Right? And then why does he do it? So I think that those themes, those questions make Pet Cemetery just endlessly honest and difficult novel. So I'd say that one. I haven't chosen one collection of his short stories yet. So for that one, I would choose either Everything's Eventual or Skeleton Crew, because I love all his short story collections. So I'd choose one of those two. Just today, it would probably be Everything's Eventual. Recently, I spoke about on a podcast on which we both appeared called Talking Scared. Wonderful podcast. We talked
Love
about,
Neil.
yeah, Neil is a rock star. Neil is amazing, as are you, of course.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I'm absolutely loving. If I forget to say, I'm loving this conversation so much.
Oh my
This is
God.
amazing. So, yeah, you and Neil are both rock stars. But in that show, I talked about The Road Virus Heads North. I think that's a masterpiece.
Yes.
I think 1408. I think that sometimes when something gets made into a movie, we think about the movie and John Cusack, Samuel L. Jackson. Why not? It was a really good movie. But that story, dang, 1408 is a story. Most collections don't have a single masterpiece. I'd say Everything's Eventual has multiple masterpieces,
Yeah.
and those are just two of them. So I'll put Everything's Eventual in there as one of my top five king. And then for my final king, today only, I am going to say I'm going to go ahead and put The Stand in there just because it's been so much a part of my life since I was 16 or 17, and it's been so much a part of my recent life. I'm so thankful to Christopher Golden and Brian Keene for editing that. I feel such like a connection to the other writers. You mentioned Nat Cassidy, who has a story in that. Josh Mallerman, I read his story, and it's just a knockout. It's incredible. Caroline Kepnes, who's a good friend, wrote a story. And by the way, we talked about like Lovecraftian things. A novel that everybody should read by Caroline Kepnes is Providence. Incredible novel that far more people should read. So I feel close to the other writers, connected to them. Like S.A. Cosby is a friend, and I feel connected to him. Sina Paleo has a story in there, and I feel connected to her. So it's like The Stand, in a way, it like has bound me to all those other writers in ways that I wasn't before. It has, I think that The Stand is really about life. It encapsulates all of life. And I just feel so there's this funny book called Save the Cat. Save the Cat. Like, have you heard of that one?
Screenwriting, right?
Screenwriting Bible. It's like one of the foremost screenwriting books, and it's a great book. Like, it's really good. Blake Snyder, and I use it in my classes. I use it in my film class, my creative writing class. It's great stuff. And one thing he talks about in there that I think The Stand is the quintessential example of, he talks about the emotional color wheel. And he talks about, like, if you were to, I don't do this, I tried to once. He talks about having because some writers do this really well. They use like a bulletin board with like note cards, and they'll have different colored note cards for different scenes or different kinds of note cards or whatever. I love that idea. It just doesn't work for me because I just work differently. I'm more of like an explorer. I just set out and I don't follow any particular path, and that's what works for me. But what he talks about there is that if you is a writer of whatever you're writing, and I think this goes for all art. I think this goes for musicians. Think about your favorite album. I think your favorite album, it's probably not all ballads. It's probably not all like fast, rock songs. It's going to have texture. It's going to have these different moods and nuances and vibes. And I think that if you look at your favorite painting, right, even in black and white, you have just almost limitless shades in a black and white photograph. Or if you have a painting, a beautiful painting, you paint in different colors. So I think as an artist in general, it's a lot about the contrast between, in this case, emotions. So that emotional color wheel in The Stand is constantly spinning, right? We have joy, we have depravity, we have lust, we have very sweet, like a crush, we have frustration and confusion, we have rage, we have passion, we have longing, we have hopelessness, we have just utter fear, we have disdain and contempt for someone, we have revulsion with the way that people behave, we have the suspicion that someone has lost his mind, like we do with the kid. We have every emotion. And as you cycle through The Stand from chapter to chapter, from place to place and character to character, you cycle through these different emotions. And King captures all of them, like chapters with Nick in this small town that's becoming a ghost town. Those couldn't be more different than the chapters with Lloyd and what's happening with him. And those couldn't be any different than the ones with Franny and Harold and then you go to East Texas down here with Stu. Stu is the man. Stu is the man that ages 16, 17, 18, all the way, in a way, even into now. Stu is kind of the man that I've wanted to make myself into. Not in every way, but in certain ways. He's a character I just admired so deeply because I didn't have a dad. I didn't have a dad when I was a kid. And so I sought father figures. My grandpa was my greatest father figure, the best man I've ever known. But they say it takes a village. So in this case, it's like I looked to books and movies. Like, so Superman, Christopher Reeve, father figure to me. What an amazing example he set, right? What a beautiful, and I think probably a beautiful man too, by the way.
Yes.
And same thing with Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker. Like that was what I wanted to be. I wanted to find that courage. And so with Stu Redman, the way that he reacted, he was scared as hell when he was like patient zero or whatever he was. But the way that he thought himself out of that, the way that he like kept his integrity, the way that he behaved, I'm like, I want to be that. I want to be that man so badly. Show me how to do it, Stu. And so I feel like, that character alone, probably my favorite King character of all time. Anyway, that he and Ben Hanscom are my two favorite characters. So sorry for just going on this filibuster, but you talk about your favorite five King books of all time. Oh my gosh, what a treasure trove. Have you talked about yours before? Have you talked about what your very favorites are?
I don't think so, but no apologies necessary, sir. This is amazing. Really quick, I think my top fives, of course, as you know, it is shuffling around a little bit, but we got some common favorites, my guy. Full Dark No Stars is also in my top five because that was my very first King title as a
Oh,
26-year-old post-grad burnt out student. I've never read King in my life, and I pulled that one out of my dad's office, and it changed my life. Complete 180 of my life. And that was my very first King title. Blew me away.
oh, that's amazing.
Full Dark No Stars is definitely in there in the top five. I also think Revival would be there as well for all the reasons you mentioned.
Wow.
That is a hauntingly beautiful story. The other one that might be, well, no, it's a definite, is Duma Key.
That's top 10. Yes. Yes.
Duma is like the most amazing Gothic novel. It is so incredible. I've read it 3 times. Yeah, minimum 3 times. Gosh, it's stunning. It's perfect. I also think that Joyland, just because it's so tight and perfect, and that's a story I teach, that's one that I happily would just page after page after page. Look what he's doing here. Okay, see how we have this inclusion of this character. Notice how we have nuance here. So that is a book that I think you can teach. Joyland is like perfect storytelling for me.
Nice. Yes. Amazing so far, by the way.
The fifth one, of course, it's so hard. It's gonna have to be It, because it just gives and gives and gives, and it's masterful. And when I first read it, I'm Bill Denbrough.
Wow.
That's probably why, since we're sharing all the things, that's probably why I'm not a parent, is because I was Bill with my brothers.
Oh, wow.
I took care of them to the point where losing them, or the thought of losing them, scared me so deep in my soul. I had anxiety as a little girl into adulthood. I still have it. So I was scarred forever by responsibility, by being a big sister and taking
Gosh.
care of others. That it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't have the capacity to be a parent because I gave too much as a child.
That's incredible.
I am the Bill, but reading it as an adult, my favorite King character, I think, of all time is Mike Hanlon.
Oh, really? The librarian.
The task that he has to do is the
Yeah.
hardest thing ever. And everybody else is successful and free from dairy. And he's the lighthouse keeper. And he's a tragic character. He's a beautiful character. His dark family history he's genius. And that's hard. It's hard to choose, but for right now, until somebody else beats him, I think Mike
Yeah.
Hanlon might be my favorite King character.
That's a wonderful choice. And it's an unexpected choice because I don't think people appreciate him. I think the hardest thing to make compelling is decency and then constancy. That's not sexy, right? You have these roles, these characters that are more flamboyant or more whatever, like Jack Torrance, the scenery chewing kind of characters. But I think that it reminds me a little bit. There's a movie called 310 to Yuma with Christian.
I'm a fan.
Okay, I teach that movie. I love it so much. And Christian Bale's character, if that character had been essayed by other people, by other actors, it wouldn't have been what it is. It's so compelling because Bale makes decency interesting. And I feel like King does that with Mike Hanlon. I talked about Beverly being the, in some ways the heart and the spine, but Hanlon, like you said, he's the lighthouse keeper. He's the one, the character who sacrifices.
Yes.
He's the one who makes everything possible. If you took out, like if it were a house of cards and you took one, you can't take any of the losers out. There would be no house of cards without Mike, right?
Right.
Because he's the one, he erects the house of cards. He's the one that brings them together, that guides them, and does so unselfishly, sacrifices himself. Two other things about that as you were talking. One, I don't want to forget, you have a cat, right?
Yes.
If you said the word it, the tail like swished right behind you through the back. It was so poetic and awesome.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
oh, that's so cool. And the cat looks beautiful, by the way.
Oh, little Harvey. Of course, he interrupts. He needs pets at the most inconvenient time.
He deserves all the pets. He's awesome. And then the other thing about it is about it, not to dredge anything up, but the scenes I cried the last time I listened to it with all the scenes with Bill and his pain. It didn't hit me the first time I read it, but like going back through King's tenderness for that, his sensitivity and rendering that was so powerful. You feel that loss, that love is as powerful as any love.
Yeah.
It's powerful as two married people. It's as powerful as parent and child. It is just this extraordinarily powerful love. And I didn't appreciate it the first time, but I just love how he shows Bill. I think that might be for me, that's the most powerful part of Bill, right? His love for Georgie,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So I can certainly see why that would resonate with you and your experiences. Yeah.
Bill's love of Georgie is so character defining for him to even the worst extent.
Yes.
And I think some of the most beautiful parts in the novel, I still cry when I read them, is when Bill is trying to say goodbye to Georgie and Pennywise keeps exploiting that. And he's
Oh,
trying to move on and let go because that loss defines his whole life. He
right.
becomes a horror writer because of that. He's just an absolutely incredible character. But one of the reasons why it is definitely in the top 5 is it changes as you change. And the characters who you loved the first time you read them, you still love them, but it's different. And then you
Oh,
see power in other characters. So Bill is me. Bill is always going to be probably the character I love the most.
yeah.
But Mike Hanlon is the one as an adult who I see and I say, I really see you, buddy. And I wish I could, if ever I could teleport myself to Derry, I would go and be friends with this man, Mr. Janz. He
Amazing.
needs friends. I mean, he has them, but they're not
Right.
in Derry. He needs
Right.
a community of people who can help carry this burden.
And he deserves them. Yeah, you're right. And as proof of what we talked about, the list being in flux, as you were talking, it returned to my number one slot and bumped out Pet Cemeteries. So
I get it.
so it's top 5 now again.
Beautiful. Perfect. Oh, absolutely stellar incandescent list. Perfect. So
Yours
good.
too. Yours is extraordinary. I love it.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Every now and again, I get close to swapping one out, but it's hard to knock them off. It's hard. You got to have a real years and years of power to knock off a top fiver. It's a tall order, but we have made it. We've made it through all the questions, Mr. Jan. So at this point in time, if you could give everybody out there some Jan's updates, talk about Children of the Dark, all the fun stuff, any updates you want to share with folks.
Sure. So I'll try to make it as fast as I can.
Not needed, but only if you want to.
That's kind of you. So Children of the Dark was re-released within the last 6 months or so. And so I'd love people to read that. It's kind of a kids on bikes tale in the same vein as The Body and It, frankly. Those are the two most instrumental books in the creation of Children of the Dark. And then the sequel to that came out only a couple months ago. And so I'd love you to read that. And you mentioned The Dismembered. That's a fairly recent novella. That's a gothic story.
Oh,
set
loved it.
well, thank you so much. I'm super proud of that one. And I'm working on something with a similar vibe right now, by the way. So that's, yeah. So I'm super excited about that too. I have coming out in 2025 a novel called Veil. It's a sci-fi horror novel in September from Blackstone Publishing. So excited about that. The Stand anthology, End of the World as We Know It, comes out in June from Simon and Schuster. Obviously, as we've discussed, extremely excited about that. I've got several more projects that are done or in the process of being edited, either with my agent or just with me, that'll hopefully be seeing the light of day in the next couple years. So excited about. And I'll be appearing in several places. So you can find me online anywhere. JonathanJanz.com is my website. Please subscribe to my newsletter. You can sign up there. And I'll be appearing this weekend. Well, at least whatever. I don't know when this will air, but August 3rd, I'll be in Evanston. I'll be in St. Louis in early October for Scares That Care AuthorCon. That'll be amazing. I'll be in late October. I'll be at the first ever King Con.
Oh,
yeah, the convention for Stephen King. Yeah.
okay. I might need tickets now. Okay.
I would love for you to go. I'll be there in Las Vegas, October 24th through 27th. My birthday is the 27th. So that's a very fun way to celebrate my birthday, is to be at this Stephen King convention. Mick Garris, director of the Stand miniseries, will be there. Several awesome authors and artists will be there. So I'm super excited about that. So certainly an extravaganza for all constant readers. But yeah, early October, St. Louis is a great place to be. And that's for charity, for Scares That Care. And then late October is another great place to be. And there's so many other things, but that's just a quick cross-section of things that I'm excited about.
Oh my goodness. Okay, because yeah, I'm only 4 hours from Vegas and I've been thinking about going. I've been hemming and hawing, but now that you're going, I need you to sign my book. So I'm definitely going to go now. Oh my goodness.
Love for you to go.
Oh, Mr. Janz, this has been a constant reader interview that is so blindingly bright. I need sunglasses. It is just, I can tell you are a constant reader that has passion for King's work. And that's something you and I have in common. We can sense it in each other, and it's a real privilege to be a part of. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing that passion in this interview today. It means everything. And I know so many King fans out there connect with people just letting the deepest parts of their heart be heard with what this man's art has brought to our lives. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Well, I'd send that right back to you. The King constant reader light shines from you, emanates from you in the best, warmest possible way. It's just so clear how sincere you are, and you're also just, you gave me a lot to think about. Like, you're super astute at like analyzing King in ways that I hadn't considered. So I really appreciate that about you. And so the combination of enthusiasm, passion, intellect, all of it is just, it makes this super special. And you're definitely a shining light to others. So I really appreciate you. So thank you so much.
Oh my goodness, I can't speak. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Janz. It was a real pleasure.
A pleasure for me. I'm thankful. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, big deep breath. Maybe some tear dabbing as well. Isn't Mr. Janz an absolute prince? Don't you want to be his best friend immediately? I do, 1000%. Huge thank yous to Mr. Janz for his time. What an honor, what a treat, what a joy. Oh, how I wish I could attend all of Mr. Janz's classes. I would definitely 21 Jump Street it and sit in the back, be really quiet. Although it would be tempting to start passing notes, one of my favorite high school pastimes. But I would never, could never in Mr. Janz's class. Plus, do high schoolers even pass notes anymore, guys? I think it's all texting now. Very sad. Ugh. Notes, especially girl notes, were magical. So many pen colors and story threads and pages of secrets and rumors. Oh, good times. I digress. Please make sure you visit jonathanjanz.com to sign up for his newsletter and stay plugged in with all of his creative output. I, for one, am absolutely chomping at the bit for next year's Stand short story anthology. It's the end of the world as we know it. Oh my goodness, friends, that is going to be so incredible, and you'll be happy to learn that I plan on finally remedying and rectifying a terrible lapse in my King reading journey. I will most certainly revisit the Stand this fall because my book club has decided to embrace the world of Captain Trips and the Walking Dude. So after I finish Wolves of the Calla, I will begin a full reread of 1978's The Stand, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's been nearly 10 years since I made the tragic mistake of finishing 600 pages, shelving the novel because I don't know why. Clearly, I must have been lobotomized in the night. The exact reason eludes me, but yes, I shall return to the Stand, and it will be a glorious reunion, and I will finish it. I will! For those of you who are enjoying the podcast and would like to observe what else this Kim C character is up to, please head to my Patreon, The Dance Macabre with Kim C, which is an extension of the Year of Underrated Stephen King podcast, where I prioritize Stephen King short stories, Stephen King females, and any additional King-related content that strikes my fancy. At present, I'm working my way through the 1993 Nightmares and Dreamscape short story collection for the very first time, and last week I read The Night Flyer, which was so much fun. Yay, vampires! I am having a ball. The Patreon is a total blast with shorter, bubbly episodes for your listening pleasure, and I highly recommend you pop on over there and party with me at patreon.com/dancewithkimc. That's dance with an S. Okay, dear ones, parting is such sweet sorrow. I have Wolves of the Calla to read, which, holy crap, it is so great to be back with the quartet. I'm so happy, smiling ear to ear. Be sure to stay tuned for Wolves of the Calla coverage, which should be coming up in a few weeks, fingers crossed. But before Wolves of the Calla, we're going to have a totally fun outlier conversation with a fellow constant reader guest who has returned to the podcast to chat with me about a singular Stephen King short story that I'm really, really smitten for, and you guys are going to love it. I know you love this guest so much. You've listened to him already. He is such a charming little mischief maker, and our chat is the cat's pajamas, so stay tuned for that as well. This busy bee has got to buzz. Thank you all so very much for listening. Please say hello at underratedsk@gmail if you'd like to let me know where you're listening from, what you think of the show, where you're at on your King journey, any recommendations, etc. And I shall respond to you promptly. But for now, wherever you are in the world, enjoy the last of summer as autumn approaches. Minus you, Australia, still thinking of you. Love you. Take care, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.